I turned 82 the week I signed the will that detonated everything. People imagine that being a millionaire makes you careful. In my experience, it makes you reckless. You go through life assuming anything broken can be replaced. Chairs, cars, houses, even relationship. Money behaves like armor until you realize it's mostly paper and bravado. The morning it happened, I sat in my lawyer's office surrounded by mahogany shelves and the faint smell of dust and printer toner. Robert Kensington, my attorney of 30 years, leaned over the polished desk as if bracing for a confession. His hair had gone from silver to white, and I was fairly sure mine had gone from white to something resembling fog. "This is unusual," Robert said, tapping the last page of my new will. "Unusual is better than dead," I replied. He adjusted his glasses. "Leaving almost everything to Evelyn Hart? After 40 years of no contact. You speak as though I've left it to a ghost." "That's precisely the issue, Henry. She might as well be one." I didn't answer. I just stared at my signature still drying on the paper, a shaky H at the start that betrayed every tremor my pride refused to admit. Robert cleared his throat. "Your children will contest this." "I'm counting on it," I said. It was the closest thing to truth I'd spoken aloud in months. To understand the madness of that morning, you'd need to understand Evelyn. But that's a task far larger than paperwork. I met her in 1978, at a charity gala I had attended purely to irritate my then business partner. She was a journalist covering the event, wearing a dress the color of storms and an expression that suggested she had already solved the mystery of me before I even looked at her. We fell in love like fools do, fast, blindly, and as if time wasn't watching. We stayed together for 3 years that felt larger than an entire decade. Then life, with its fondness for sabotage, split us apart. One betrayal. One misunderstanding. One night that should have gone differently. No proper ending. No closure. Just a silence so long it started to feel like the shape of a person. Now, 40 years later, I was giving her nearly everything I owned. Call it sentimental. Call it delusional. But I call it a debt I never paid. Robert slid the documents into a folder and straightened up. "I'll file everything today." "Do that." "And what am I supposed to tell your family?" "That I've finally done something interesting." He sighed in a long, weary exhale only lawyers and disappointed spouses truly master. "Henry, you're certain about this?" "As certain as a man with little time left and too many regrets." Outside, the sunlight felt sharper than usual. The wind off the bay carried the smell of salt and autumn leaves, reminding me that everything decays beautifully if you give it enough years. I stepped into my limousine. Yes, I still used one, though mostly out of habit, and told the driver to take me home. He nodded silently and pulled away. The city passed by like an old film reel, full of memories I hadn't requested. In the rearview mirror, I saw my reflection, the lined face, the tired eyes, the man who had spent more time accumulating wealth than understanding the point of it. And somewhere beneath that reflection, buried under pride and history, lived the version of me Evelyn once loved. I wondered what she'd think of this ghost I'd become. My home, Caldwell House, sat on the edge of the cliffs overlooking the water. Everyone called it a mansion, but I never liked that word. It sounded arrogant. The place was simply too big for one man, too empty for anyone with a heartbeat. I had staff, of course, housekeepers, groundskeepers, a cook, a nurse who visited twice a week. But a staff is not a family. A staff never picks up your call at 3 in the morning because you can't sleep. A staff doesn't ask why you're rewriting your will in the first place. Family should do those things. Should. My children, however, rarely visited unless they wanted something. They were good people in the way expensive wine is good, complicated, impressive to others, but ultimately predictable. My eldest son, Richard, saw money as a chessboard. My daughter, Claire, saw it as security. And my youngest, Michael, saw it as the only language worth speaking. They loved me, I think, in their own practical ways. But love like that doesn't reach old bones. It only brushes past them politely. By the time the limousine pulled up to the circular driveway, I already imagined the chaos waiting to bloom when the will surfaced. I pictured Richard's cold fury, Claire's wounded confusion, Michael's theatrical outrage. I felt a twinge of guilt. It passed quickly. That night, unable to sleep, I walked through the west wing of the house, a place I rarely visited. The portraits of ancestors stared down with their stiff Victorian disapproval. I reached the last door on the left, opened it, and stepped into the room I hadn't entered in years. My study. Not the modern one where I paid bills and read tax reports, but the original study. The place where I once wrote letters to Evelyn. Dozens of them. Letters I never sent. Letters I was too proud, too ashamed, or too cowardly to mail. The room was untouched, the dust floating like gentle ghosts in the moonlight. On the desk rested a wooden box. Inside were all the letters tied with a ribbon that had faded from blue to something less certain. I sat down and untied them, reading until dawn crept into the room. Every sentence carried a version of me I barely recognized, young, stubborn, hopeful. That old pain stirred again, ancient but persistent. At 6 a.m, my housekeeper, Nora, knocked softly. "Mr. Caldwell? Breakfast." "Later," I said. "You didn't sleep again." "I'm old. Sleep is optional." She stepped inside and paused when she saw the letters scattered across the desk. Her voice softened. "Is that her?" "Yes." She nodded almost respectfully. "You look like a man remembering something important." "I'm a man remembering something stupid," I said. "I loved her." "That's never stupid." She left me to the ghost. Around noon, the storm began. It started with a text from Richard. "Call me. Urgent." Then Claire. "Dad, what did you sign?" "Robert just called me." Then Michael, the fastest of them all. "What the hell is this?" I turned off my phone. I'm not proud of that, but it was the only way to preserve my sanity, and possibly theirs. Later in the afternoon, Richard arrived in person. He demolished my peace simply by stepping out of his BMW, shoulders tense, jaw locked. He didn't bother knocking. He walked straight into the living room, where I sat reading a newspaper I wasn't actually reading. "Tell me it's a mistake," he said. "It's not." His face reddened. "You're leaving the estate, the investments, the land, everything, to a woman we've never even met? You've met plenty of people and disliked most of them. Meeting her wouldn't help. This isn't the time for your humor." "Richard, for me it's always time for humor." He dropped into an armchair as if gravity had doubled. "Dad, who is she?" "A woman I wronged a long time ago." "And that earns her everything you own?" "It earns her what I want her to have." He stared at me like I was a stranger wearing my skin. "You're sick," he said finally. "You're not thinking clearly." "I'm thinking clearer now than I did for half my life. We will contest this." "I've already anticipated that." "You can't do this to us." "I can," I said, "because it was never yours to begin with." He stood abruptly. "I'll be back with Claire and Michael. We're not done." "No," I said quietly. "But we've barely begun." After he left, I walked out to the cliffside balcony overlooking the water. The wind whipped through the salt air, cold enough to remind me I wasn't immortal. Inserting a third-person distance for a moment, the scene might have looked like this. An elderly man stands at the edge of a life he built on ambition and stubbornness, staring into the ocean as if it could explain where the years went. His hair lifts in the wind, white against the gray sky. He looks regal and frail all at once, a king without a kingdom, a father without understanding, a lover without closure. But inside my own skin, the truth felt simpler. I missed her. For 40 years I carried that absence like a locked drawer. Opening it now felt reckless, but age makes recklessness feel strangely righteous. I imagined her as she was the last time I saw her. Dark hair, sharp wit, the kind of smile that made everything else irrelevant. I wondered how time had sculpted her. Whether she'd grown softer or sharper. Whether she ever thought of me or if I was just a footnote in her wild years. Maybe leaving her everything was my way of forcing the universe to acknowledge what we never finished. Maybe it was my apology. Maybe it was my undoing. That night, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. I let it ring once, twice. Then I answered. A quiet voice filled my ear. A voice I knew instantly, with the kind of certainty that bypasses logic and goes straight to the oldest part of the heart. "Henry," she said. My breath caught, brittle as glass. "Evelyn." Silence stretched between us, but it wasn't the cold kind. It was full of history, of almosts and never should-haves. "I heard what you did," she said. "I imagined you would." "Why now?" "Because it should have been you," I said. "Back then." And maybe now, if I'm lucky. She exhaled, a sound halfway between a sigh and a tremor. We need to talk, she said. Yes. In person. Yes. Tomorrow. I'll be here. When the call ended, I sat in the darkness, staring at nothing and hearing everything. My children's anger. My past catching fire. My heart, old and stubborn, beating harder than it had in years. Tomorrow, Evelyn Hart would walk back into my life. And nothing, not family, not money, not regret, would stay the same. The next morning felt like the kind of morning reserved for confessions or funerals. Quiet, too still, as if the world itself were holding its breath to see whether I would survive the day. I woke up before sunrise, though I couldn't tell if I'd slept at all. My pulse beat with an unfamiliar energy that didn't belong to men my age. It was ridiculous, really, an 82-year-old man pacing his bedroom like a teenager about to see his high school sweetheart. I showered, shaved, and chose a suit that didn't make me look like a wax figure. Navy. Subtle. A little forgiving in the waist, though I'd never admit it. Nora, my housekeeper, knocked softly and stepped inside with a tray. I brought breakfast, she said. Thought you might need something warm. I looked at the eggs, untouched by time or emotion, then at her concerned face. Big day, she asked gently. Possibly catastrophic. I figured. You've been humming. I don't hum. You did this morning. I grunted something non-committal and took a sip of coffee. She hovered like a mother hen disguised as a woman in her 60s with impeccable hair. She's coming today, isn't she? Nora said. Yes. She must have meant a lot to you. Means, I corrected her before I could stop myself. Her eyebrows lifted. Then good. I hope she reminds you you're still alive. I waved her off, but her words stayed with me. Still alive. It had been a while since someone said that to me without a hint of medical concern. By 11 a.m., I stood at the tall windows overlooking the driveway, pretending not to look like I was waiting. The ocean wind rattled the glass. The clouds moved fast across the sky as though racing toward something I couldn't see. I checked my watch so often I began to suspect it was judging me. At exactly 11:23, a dark silver sedan turned into my driveway. Sleek, elegant, confident. The kind of car someone drives when they've grown into their own skin. My breath stopped, actually stopped, when the driver's door opened. Evelyn Hart stepped out. Even from a distance, I knew it was her. Some people keep their spark through every era of their life. Evelyn wasn't just one of them, she was the blueprint. Her hair, once raven dark, was streaked with silver now, gathered into a loose twist that looked effortless and impossible at the same time. Her posture was straight, her movements calm. She wore a long charcoal coat cinched at the waist, the collar turned slightly up against the breeze. She looked like time had tried to age her politely, but she had negotiated favorable terms. My pulse hammered a rhythm I hadn't heard in decades. When she reached the front steps, I was already opening the door. For a heartbeat, neither of us spoke. Her eyes, those sharp, observant eyes, roamed over my face, and I felt all 82 of my years land squarely on my shoulders. "Hello, Henry," she said. Her voice hadn't changed. Softer maybe. A little deeper. But unmistakably hers. "Evelyn," I managed. "You look well, you look like yourself." The corner of her mouth lifted. "You too. Though I think one of us is lying politely." "It's probably me," I said. That earned the faintest laugh. A fragile, careful sound. But real. "May I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside, suddenly aware that my hands were shaking. She entered my home like someone entering a memory. Slow, deliberate, as if she were afraid to disturb the ghosts. We walked into the sitting room overlooking the cliff. She removed her coat and placed it on the arm of a chair. Beneath it, she wore a simple navy dress that fit her too perfectly to be accidental. She sat. I remained standing longer than necessary, trying to remember how to breathe. "You haven't changed the house much," she said, glancing around. "I changed," I replied. "The house just didn't notice." Her eyes softened. "You seem older." "You're not supposed to say that." "I'm allowed. You were never honest about your age when we were young. I told you I was 32. You were 35. Still handsome," I said. "A little reckless. A lot reckless." I didn't deny it. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was full. Heavy with all the words we'd never spoken. Finally, Evelyn took a slow breath. I heard about the will. Everyone has heard by now. I imagine your children are furious. Furious is too small a word. She studied me carefully. Why did you do it, Henry? For a moment I looked away, out toward the gray horizon. The waves crashed against the rocks with the same stubborn persistence they'd had long before I was born. Because, I said quietly, I owed you something. She didn't look convinced. After 40 years? After a lifetime. Henry, her voice trembled just enough to betray her. You can't undo the past by emptying your bank accounts into my name. It's not about the money. People always say that when it absolutely is. I turned back to her. You mattered. You still matter. I never stopped regretting how things ended. A regret isn't a will, Henry. I know. But it's what I have. She held my gaze, her eyes darker now, more layered. Tell me the truth, Evelyn said. Is this why you called me? Or was I just supposed to hear about it like everyone else? I hesitated. And then, because age strips a man of his ability to lie well, I said the truth. I was hoping it would bring you back. She inhaled sharply, and for a moment her mask cracked. Grief, surprise, something like anger. Money shouldn't be the reason anyone comes back, she whispered. I knew you wouldn't come for the money. That's why I chose you. A long silence. She lowered her gaze to her hands. You think too highly of me. You always thought too little of yourself. Evelyn stood suddenly and walked toward the tall windows, her silhouette framed by the pale sky. She crossed her arms, rubbing one thumb over her sleeve the way she used to when deep in thought. You disappeared, she said quietly. All those years ago. Without explanation. Without a goodbye. You left me, I said. She turned. I left because you lied to me. I lied because I was afraid. Of what? Of losing you, I said. Which, as it turns out, was the fastest way to lose you. She shook her head, half sorrow, half disbelief. We were impossible, Henry. Passionate, chaotic, selfish, beautiful, but impossible. And yet I spent 40 years looking back at the ashes. You were the one who lit the fire. Her eyes glimmered, not with tears, but with a kind of fierce honesty I hadn't earned. You should have told me, she said. You should have trusted me. I know. We both fell silent again. She turned back to the window, watching a seagull cut through the sky. The light made her profile look timeless. When I heard your lawyer was trying to reach me, she said, I thought you might be dying. I'm old. That's not the same thing. I thought you might want closure. I wanted you. The confession landed between us like a dropped glass, quiet, fragile, dangerous. Evelyn exhaled and rubbed her temples. This is too much, Henry. I came because I didn't want your children to think I manipulated you. You didn't. But they will. They already do. And you don't care? I care, I said. But not enough to change my mind. She closed her eyes. You're going to tear your family apart. They were already cracked, I said. This only made the cracks visible. A knock suddenly echoed through the house, loud, impatient. The kind of knock that announces trouble before the door even opens. Evelyn stiffened. Is that Richard? I said. What does he want? War. Before she could respond, Richard stormed into the room, his face flushed with fury. He stopped dead when he saw her. You're Evelyn Hart, he said, accusation sharp in his voice. She straightened. Yes. You have no right to be here. Richard, I warned. You think you can just walk back into his life and take everything? He snapped. Enough, I said sharply. But Richard wasn't listening. His gaze was locked on her with a mix of anger and something else, fear, maybe. Or the kind of outrage children feel when they realize their parents had a life before them. You manipulated him, he said. You've been gone for 40 years and suddenly. Richard, Evelyn said, her tone unexpectedly calm, I haven't spoken to your father since 1983. That's a long time to stay quiet until there's money involved. Evelyn's jaw tightened. You don't know anything about me. And I don't want to. I stepped between them. Richard, leave. No. You're acting like a child. I am your child. And that doesn't give you jurisdiction over my life. His face twisted. Over your life, no. Over your estate, yes. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. This isn't about the estate. It's always about the estate, Richard said. She shook her head slowly. You poor man. Richard blinked. What did you just say? You think this is about money, Evelyn said. But it's about guilt. Yours. His. Everyone's. None of this is actually about you, Richard. And that's what terrifies you. He looked like she'd slapped him. I felt a strange swell of pride. Evelyn had always known how to cut through someone's armor with just a sentence. Get out, Richard told her. No, I said. You get out. He stared at me, betrayal carving lines into his face deeper than age ever could. You're choosing her, he whispered. No, I said softly. I'm choosing myself. Richard didn't respond. He turned and walked out, each footstep echoing like a verdict. When he was gone, Evelyn sank into the nearest chair. That went poorly. I expected worse, I said. Henry, this is a disaster. I know. And you're calm about it? I've survived worse disasters. She gave me a tired, almost disbelieving look. You're impossible. So they say. She laughed. Really laughed this time, shaking her head. What am I doing here? I sat across from her. Maybe you came because part of you wondered if things could have been different. Her expression softened. And could they? Yes, I said. But only if we don't run from them this time. She leaned back, studying me with the same gaze she used on interview subjects decades ago. A gaze that saw everything, even the hidden parts. I didn't come to restart anything, she said. I know. I came because I needed to see if you were still the man I remembered. And am I? She hesitated. You're older, she said. Sadder. Kinder. Wiser. Stubborn as ever. And lonely. I swallowed. You always did enjoy honesty. It's the only thing we never tried. The room held its breath. Finally she stood. I'm not staying. Not today. I need time to think. I nodded. When will I see you again? She paused at the doorway. When I decide if I'm walking toward a second chance, she said quietly, or another heartbreak. Then she left my home. The sound of the door closing echoed through the halls like the softest thunder. And I knew, absolutely knew, that nothing in my life was going to be simple ever again. I used to think that secrets were like old wine. The longer they stayed sealed, the richer they became. Now I'm beginning to realize they're more like uncollected trash. Leave them long enough, and sooner or later the smell spreads across the entire neighborhood. Mine, apparently, was reaching all the way from Manhattan to the quiet, oak-lined streets of Westchester, where I now sat in my study, staring at a framed photograph from 32 years ago. Me. A younger version of me, hair, arrogance, and cheekbones firmly intact, standing beside a woman who wasn't my wife. Her dark hair was tied back in a ribbon I bought for her at a street market in Santa Fe. We were laughing at something the photographer had said. I couldn't remember the joke, but I remembered the sound of her laugh. It lived somewhere under my ribs, buried deep and inconveniently alive. Her name had been Evelyn. And this morning, I learned she was dead. You'd think after 80 years on Earth, 40 of them cushioned in wealth and ego, a man might take news of death with a stoic nod. Yet there I was, clutching the armrest of my leather chair like a child afraid to fall off a horse. The lawyer's voice still rang in my ears. She named you, Mr. Dalton, in her personal letter which was attached to her will. I hadn't heard that name, Evelyn Brooks, spoken aloud in decades. It hit me with the same force as stepping outside into winter without a coat. A sharp, clean ache. My grandson James hovered awkwardly in the doorway. Grandpa? You okay? Perfectly fine, I said, the biggest lie told in this house since my accountant told me I didn't need to worry about capital gains tax. He shifted on his feet, the way tall 20-year-olds do when they're torn between caring and pretending not to. You've been sitting there a while. Thinking. It's legal for a man my age. Is it about the letter from that Brooks woman? It took effort not to bark at him. Instead, I let out a breath so slow it might have been mistaken for spiritual enlightenment. Yes, James. It is. She wasn't, you know, someone you cheated on Grandma with, right? He asked, far too casually. I stared at him. He swallowed. I continued staring. Okay, he said, hands raised. I'll shut up. After he retreated, I leaned back and let the wheels of memory grind into motion. It wasn't a clean process. More like starting an old engine that coughs, rattles, spits smoke, and then, almost reluctantly, begins to purr. I met Evelyn in New Mexico during a conference that had nothing to do with conferences and everything to do with me running away from a marriage that was already descending into frostbite. My late wife, Claire, and I had grown so distant that even arguing required effort we no longer possessed. Evelyn had been the opposite of everything I understood: impulsive, artistic, warm in a way that didn't require negotiation. I had spent 2 weeks with her. 2 stolen, brilliant, reckless weeks. And I walked away because I was a coward who thought responsibility meant staying miserable in the correct household. She'd written me letters for years afterward. I kept a few, burned a few, lost track of the rest. But now she was gone, and her final message was sitting in my study drawer, still sealed. I hadn't opened it yet because men like me, wealthy, stubborn, allegedly wise, are sometimes the biggest cowards alive. Around noon, my lawyer, Gregory Hale, arrived at the house. Gregory was a tall, humorless man whose suits always looked like they cost more than my first home. He carried a folder the way some priests carry scripture, tightly, reverently, and with a faint dread that someone might challenge its power. "Before we proceed," he said, "you should know that Ms. Brooks left behind a daughter." I blinked. "A daughter?" "Yes." "And why is that my problem?" He cleared his throat. "Because, sir, she claims you are her biological father." I muttered something so inappropriate it caused my housekeeper, Maria, who had been dusting the hallway, to cross herself from behind the wall. Gregory ignored my outburst. "She's 31. Her name is Lila Brooks. And according to the terms of Evelyn's will, she was instructed to contact you." "Of course she was instructed," I snapped. "Dying wishes are always instructions. That's the curse of mortality. Everyone suddenly becomes a general giving orders none of the living want to follow." He placed the folder on my desk. "She wants to meet you." "Wants or demands?" His silence answered for him. I opened the drawer again. The envelope inside was cream-colored, edges worn but intact, my name written in a handwriting I could never mistake. I didn't touch it. "Set up the meeting," I said. "But at a cafe. Public places discourage emotional theatrics." "As you wish." James appeared again as soon as the door shut. He had the talent of materializing for moments that were none of his business. "You have another kid?" he asked, eyes wide. "Possibly," I said. "That's wild. Does Dad know?" "You will not tell your father." "But—" "No." He held up his hands again, smiling. "Okay, but you have to admit it's kinda cool. Like, secret agent stuff." "James," I said, "I cheated on your grandmother during the Carter administration. There's nothing cool about that." Later that day, I drove myself to the cafe. When you're old, people fuss over you as though you're composed of fragile glass and unpaid medical bills. I ignored the pleas for a driver and took the car anyway. There's a strange comfort in gripping a steering wheel, a small rebellion against the universe's attempts to usher you gently toward the grave. The cafe was one of those modern places where the chairs look uncomfortable on purpose and the pastries are named after poet. I spotted her immediately. Lila. She had Evelyn's eyes. That was the first thing I noticed, and the most painful. The second thing was her posture. Upright, arms folded, jaw set in a determination that told me she'd practiced this meeting in her head many times. She was beautiful in the way Evelyn had been. Not fragile, not polished, but vibrant, like something pulled directly from sunlight. And she looked at me as if deciding whether to hate me or tolerate me for one afternoon. I approached. She didn't smile. "You're Jeremiah Dalton," she said. "I am," I answered. She gestured stiffly to the chair across from her. I sat. She didn't. "You knew my mother," she said. I nodded. "You loved her?" A simple question. A catastrophic one. "Yes," I said. Her throat tightened. "She never told me your name until 6 months ago. She said she didn't want to destroy your life." "She wouldn't have," I said. "But I destroyed hers by leaving." She exhaled sharply, something between a laugh and a wounded gasp. "At least you know." "I always knew." She finally sat. Her voice steadied. "The letter she left for you, have you read it?" "No." "She wanted you to." "I know." She stared at me, and I felt 70 different versions of myself reflected back at me: the successful businessman, the self-righteous husband, the cowardly lover, the aging widower. None of them were flattering. "She was dying," Lila said, softer now. She had months. She told me everything. She said you weren't a mistake. She said you were the only person she ever loved like that. My chest burned. Lila opened her bag and placed an envelope on the table. Not mine, hers. This is a copy of the letter she left me. I want you to read it before you decide whether to keep me in your life. I took it. My hands shook, which annoyed me. Hands should obey you after 80 years of loyal service. I opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten, beautiful, unmistakably Evelyn. I won't quote it directly. Grief doesn't like to be shared without consent, but the essence of it was simple. She told Lila about me. About the way I had changed her life, even with the brief time we had. About how she had chosen to have her daughter even knowing I wouldn't be part of the picture. About how she never regretted it. And she told Lila something else. That she believed I still loved her, even after all these years. That if fate had been kinder, I would have stayed. That she hoped, quietly, guiltily, that one day my heart might make room for the daughter I never knew. By the time I finished, my vision had blurred enough that I had to blink several times before I could see the table again. Lila watched me with sharp eyes. Not cruel. Searching. Well, she finally asked. I don't know what you want from me, I said honestly. I don't know either, she said. But I wanted to meet you. I deserved that. Yes, I said. You did. We sat there in a silence thick enough to chew. Then she said, You look like you're about to faint. Do you want water? Whiskey, I muttered. She huffed a small laugh. It's 3 p.m. I'm 80. Time no longer applies. Her irritation cracked. Not fully, but enough for something human to peek through. We talked for an hour. It wasn't warm or easy or cinematic. It was clumsy, awkward, sharp at the edges. But she stayed. And I stayed. That had to count for something. When we stood to leave, she said, I don't know what happens next. Neither do I. We can figure it out. Slowly. Slowly, I echoed. And read your letter, Jeremiah. Her voice softened. She wrote it for you. I drove home with the envelope burning a hole in my coat pocket. When I walked into the house, James was waiting at the top of the stairs. He looked at my face, and for the first time since he hit puberty, he spoke gently. You met her? Yes. How was it? Like looking into a past I haven't forgiven myself for. He nodded. That sounds rough. It was. But good. I don't know yet. He hesitated, then stepped closer. Do you want me to stay tonight? Just in case. For a moment, and I blame exhaustion for this, the words caught in my throat. No, I said. But thank you. He nodded and disappeared down the hall. I returned to my study. The room felt smaller now. Fuller. As if memory had expanded to take up physical space. I sat, opened the drawer again, and finally picked up Evelyn's letter. Her handwriting, delicate but firm. My name at the top. I unfolded it. Her voice flooded into the room. Every sentence carried a weight I had avoided for decades. She forgave me. She loved me. She regretted nothing. She thanked me for giving her the courage to choose a life she wanted. She wished, painfully, tenderly, that things had been different. She asked me to meet Lila. She asked me not to run this time. When I reached the last line, my heart stuttered in my chest, the kind of ache that reminds you you're still alive, even when you don't always want to be. I put the letter down. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in a very long time I cried. Not the elegant, single-tear variety you see in movies. No. Mine was the messy, undignified kind that embarrasses even empty rooms. After a while, the storm eased. I wiped my face, straightened my back, and stared at the photograph of me and Evelyn one more time. Secrets decay. But love, even the forbidden, inconvenient kind, seems to ferment into something else entirely. Something that changes the air of a room. Something that refuses to stay buried. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back into the drawer. Tomorrow, I decided, I would call Lila. Slowly, yes, but not too slowly. I'd already wasted a lifetime. I woke the next morning with the unmistakable sense that someone had rearranged the furniture of my life while I was asleep. Not literally, though that had happened once when my wife, Claire, decided the sofa had too much masculine energy. No, this was the internal kind of rearrangement, the sort that shifts the weight of your memories and the angle of your regret. The sunlight creeping through my curtains felt too bright, too optimistic for a man who had spent the previous night crying into a handkerchief with my initials embroidered on it. A ridiculous indulgence, the kind of thing rich people pretend they don't enjoy. I sat up slowly. My bones creaked like an old house adjusting to the weather. I hated that sound. It reminded me that even when your heart feels 25, the rest of you is screaming 80. The letter from Evelyn lay on my nightstand. I'd brought it upstairs with the irrational instinct of someone safeguarding treasure. I didn't touch it, didn't need to. It was already living inside me, every word, every slant of her handwriting. I went downstairs for coffee, shuffling more than walking. Maria, who had worked for me since the Bush administration, watched me with the concerned eyes of someone who had seen me through heart scares, business collapses, and one unfortunate incident involving a treadmill and a misplaced confidence in my agility. "You didn't sleep well," she said. I poured coffee into my mug. "Your observational skills astonish me." "You look tired," she added, ignoring my sarcasm. "You should eat." "I'm not hungry." "Eat anyway." I obeyed, because I'd learned long ago that arguing with Maria was like arguing with the moon. "You can do it, but you won't win, and you'll look foolish trying." While I poked at my scrambled eggs, she hovered. "You met the girl yesterday." "I did. And she's a grown woman, not a girl." "That is not what I meant." She crossed her arms. "Was she kind?" "She was cautious." "That is not surprising." "No," I agreed. "It isn't." I felt her studying me, dissecting the subtle tremors of my emotions with the precision of a surgeon. "You care," she said softly. "Of course I care. I'm not a monster." "I didn't say you were," she murmured, then returned to wiping countertops that didn't need wiping. By the time my coffee was finished, I'd decided something. Not something dramatic or life-altering, but something necessary. I would call Lila. I wouldn't wait for courage to grow, because courage, in my experience, behaves like a cat. It comes to you only when it feels like it, and not a moment sooner. I dialed her number. It rang twice. "Hello?" Her voice was steady, alert. I didn't know whether she had expected my call or dreaded it. "It's Jeremiah," I said. A beat. "Hi. I'd like to see you again." Another beat, shorter, but still meaningful. "Okay. Lunch," I offered. "Somewhere less poetic than that cafe." She huffed a small laugh. "I'd appreciate that. Do you like Italian?" "I love Italian." "Perfect. Then I'll take you somewhere that serves pasta the way it should be served, with guilt and excess." She laughed again. This time, genuinely. A small victory. We settled on a restaurant in town. Neutral territory. Public enough to keep either of us from imploding. I arrived early. When you're my age, punctuality is less a courtesy and more a survival strategy. You never know when something might delay you permanently. The place was warm, the kind of restaurant where the chairs don't try to make a statement and the bread arrives fresh without anyone announcing it. The owner, a stocky man named Bruno who'd known me since my hair still had ambitions, greeted me with an enthusiastic clasp on the shoulder. "You brought someone new today?" he asked, eyes bright with curiosity disguised as hospitality. "Possibly," I said. "Try not to frighten her." "Me?" He pressed a hand to his chest. "I am a delight." I shook my head and chose a table near the window. 10 minutes later, she walked in. Lila wore jeans, a dark sweater, and an expression caught somewhere between hope and suspicion. She scanned the room, spotted me, and approached with that same careful posture she'd had the day before, shoulders square, chin high, as if bracing for something heavy. "You came early," she said. "Old people do that." She sat, smoothing her sweater, her fingers fidgeting for just a second. I liked that small display of nerve. It made her seem less perfect, less carved from Evelyn's memory. "So," she said, with the awkward frankness I had come to appreciate, "how are you feeling today?" Like someone ran my emotions through a laundry cycle and forgot the fabric softener. Her mouth twitched. "Yeah. I get that." The waiter brought menus. She didn't pick hers up. "Look, yesterday was a lot. I didn't mean to come off cold." "I was trying not to," she paused. "To hope too much. Hope. The most fragile weapon in the human arsenal." "I understand," I said. She nodded as if relieved I hadn't taken offense. "I meant what I said yesterday. We don't have to move fast. I just want honesty." No vanishing. No sudden decisions made out of guilt or panic. That seems fair. And I don't want anything from you. That startled me. Nothing. Nothing financial. Nothing material. She hesitated. I just want to know the man my mother loved. That hit me in the chest, heavy and unexpected. My throat tightened. I hid it by lifting my water glass. She noticed anyway. I'm not trying to make this harder. You're just telling the truth. That tends to have that effect. She breathed out slowly. Did you love her? She asked again, but this time it wasn't an interrogation. It was a plea. Yes, I said. I loved her very much. And I never stopped. Her eyes softened in a way I hadn't expected. She always said you were gentle. I wasn't always gentle. Not with myself. Not with my decisions. But she remembered the good, Lila said. Even when it hurt her. That was almost worse. The idea that Evelyn had carried our brief time like a cherished wound. The food arrived, mercifully interrupting the heaviness. She ate delicately, thoughtfully, as if monitoring her own appetite. I demolished my plate in a manner befitting a man who'd skipped breakfast despite Maria's nagging. Midway through the meal, she asked, "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you stayed?" "Every day," I said. She lowered her gaze. Me too. It was the closest she came to admitting loss, and it broke something quietly inside me. We talked about lighter things after that. Her job, she worked as a graphic designer for a small ad agency. Her apartment, tiny, with neighbors who argued loudly enough to qualify as a podcast. Her hobbies, painting, like her mother. But abstract, unlike her mother. You should show me your work, I said. She laughed. Maybe someday. Not yet. I accepted that. Trust takes time. Especially when you're dealing with decades of absence. After lunch, we walked outside. The air was crisp, the sky that particular shade of winter blue that always looks bolder in memory than in reality. I'm glad we did this, she said. So am I. I'd like to see you again. I'd like that too. We stood there, awkwardly, like two people on the edge of something neither of us could name yet. Then she stepped forward and hugged me. It wasn't long. It wasn't sentimental. It was cautious, brief, but real. When she pulled back, her eyes were shining, though she'd never admit it. Goodbye, Jeremiah. Goodbye, Lila. She walked away, and for the first time in many years, I felt something bloom inside me that wasn't bitterness, wasn't regret, something like renewal. I drove home with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. When I entered the house, James was once again waiting, because life enjoys a good pattern. Well, he asked. Well, I said, she's remarkable. His face lit with curiosity. Are you going to see her again? Yes. That's great, he said, then more softly, Grandpa. I think this is good for you. I didn't argue. He wasn't wrong. That evening, as I sat in my study, reviewing documents Gregory had sent regarding Evelyn's estate, my phone buzzed. A text from Lila. Thank you for lunch. Simple. Direct. Loaded with more meaning than 3 words should be allowed to carry. I replied, perhaps a little too quickly. Anytime. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. I leaned back in my chair, overwhelmed by a strange blend of bittersweetness and possibility. Then came the knock. Not a polite one, either. Urgent, sharp, the kind that announces trouble the same way thunder announces rain. Maria opened the door before I could rise. Gregory strode in, coat still on, face pale in a way I'd never seen. My stomach dropped. What happened? I asked. He closed the door behind him. We have a problem. Define problem. Your family, he said, sinking into the armchair across from me, knows. It felt as though the room lost temperature. Knows what? Everything, he said. The affair. The daughter. Evelyn's will. The meeting. Impossible. My family was many things. Dramatic, self-serving, aggressively competitive, but they were also impressively uninformed about anything not involving inheritance or holidays. How? I asked. Gregory hesitated. Your son overheard a conversation between legal staff at the firm. It shouldn't have happened. I'm handling it. My pulse thudded painfully. And what exactly does he think? That you cheated on his mother, fathered a child, covered it up, and are now planning to change your will. The last part jolted me back to full alertness. Change my will? Yes, he said grimly. They assume Lila is here to inherit. This is ridiculous, I snapped. I haven't even considered. I know, he said. But they don't. Something heavy settled inside me. The kind of heaviness you feel before a storm, not fear, but inevitability. Your daughter-in-law is furious, he continued. Your son is shocked. Your daughter, well, she's threatening litigation. I rubbed my temples. Litigation against whom? Their own father. Your assets, he clarified. They want protection. Protection from what? Empathy? This is not a joke, Gregory said. I'm not laughing. He leaned forward. We need to get ahead of this. If rumors spread, it could damage your reputation, your businesses, and potentially your relationship with Lila. There it was, the part that mattered. Does she know? I asked. Not yet. But she will. For the first time in decades, I felt real fear. Not for myself. Not for my money. But for her, for the fragile, newly born connection that could be crushed under the weight of my family's greed and resentment. What do you recommend? I asked. We schedule a meeting with your children, Gregory said. All of them. Immediately. You explain the situation on your terms. I sighed. They will tear me apart. Yes, he said. But not as badly as they'll tear Lila if we don't control the narrative. He was right. I hated that he was right. I agreed to the meeting. He left with the solemnity of a man delivering someone to their fate. When the house was quiet again, I stood at the window, watching the fading light turn the sky a bruised shade of purple. The kind of color that warns you the night ahead will not be gentle. I could feel Evelyn's letter in my pocket, a comforting weight, a reminder of everything I had lost, and everything I might still have a chance to rebuild. I whispered into the stillness, knowing she'd never hear it and saying it anyway. I won't run this time. But even as the words left my lips, I knew the path ahead would be brutal. Not because of the truth, but because of the people who feared it. And somewhere in the city, unaware of the storm gathering around her, Lila was living her evening in peaceful ignorance. That peace would not last. I've lived through some strange nights in my 82 years, but few things compare to sitting in the back of a police cruiser while wearing silk pajamas and holding my late father's final, explosive will against my chest like a newborn. The engine hummed, the lights flashed blue across the windshield, and I felt simultaneously ridiculous, ancient, and, for the first time in a long while, alive. Officer Ramirez glanced back at me in the mirror. Mr. Whitmore, you okay? As okay as any man who's survived a house break-in, a family civil war, and a surprise inheritance coup, I said. Though if you had a blanket and maybe a whiskey. No whiskey, sir. He passed me a blanket. Age has its perks. People treat you gently, like you're a fragile museum piece. Which is charming until someone tries to smash the glass case you live in. My children, Olivia and David, arrived at my estate minutes after the police cleared the scene. Both looked like they'd sprinted through fire. Hair wild, clothes half-buttoned, eyes sharp with panic. Their worry pierced me deeper than fear ever could. Dad! Olivia threw her arms around me. She clung so tightly I heard a rib complain. David followed, less openly shaken, but the subtle tremor in his hand betrayed him. What the hell happened? We'll get to that, I said, patting their shoulders. But first, I want you to see something. I lifted the envelope. The same envelope my father had apparently hidden away decades ago, the last testament of Jonathan Whitmore. The thing Richard had tried to steal. David frowned. Another will? Dad, is this going to make things worse? It depends whether you like truth or prefer things comfortably false, I said. Which earned me identical scowls from my children. They both inherited my impatience. Inside the house, after the officers finished their sweep, I set the will on the dining table. The same table I'd once used to teach Olivia multiplication and David how to build model planes. Strange how furniture remembers more than people do. Olivia crossed her arms. Before we open anything, can someone explain why Richard broke into the house? He's a snake, but this feels extreme even for him. I sighed. He wants this. Father's original last testament. It changes everything. David ran a hand through his hair. Everything as in what? The estate? Ownership? Us. Everything as in the truth about where our family fractured, I said. And then I told them. The whole story. The forbidden romance between my father and Margaret Donovan. Her pregnancy. His abandonment. His guilt. The love he was too afraid to claim publicly. Clara's mother. Clara. The room tilted a little at the thought of her. When I finished, both my children stared at me as though I'd slowly transformed into a creature with wings. So, Clara is, Olivia started. Yes. She's Margaret's daughter. My father's daughter. My half-sister. David sat. Hard. Jesus, Dad. Which was fair. Olivia blinked rapidly, not crying yet but in preparation. Does Clara know? Not yet, I said quietly. And she deserves to. But she deserves to hear it gently. Olivia shook her head, astonished. You've been dating her. Yes, I said. Unknowingly. Enthusiastically. Disastrously. She winced. Dad. I know, I muttered. Believe me, I know. The universe threw me into a Greek tragedy without giving me a script. David set his palms on the table, breath steadying. So Richard found out and wants to use this will to take the entire estate? He's trying to claim fraud, I said. Claim that our branch of the family shouldn't have inherited anything. That technically, father's first legitimate heir was Margaret's child. And since she's dead and Clara was never legally recognized. He wants everything, Olivia finished. What a bastard. For once, early morning language lessons pay off, I said. She cracked a tiny smile. Then she sobered. Dad, what are you going to do about Clara? The question hung between us like a chandelier missing a few screws. I don't know, I admitted. But I do know I care for her. And I know she deserves the truth. My only hope is that when she hears it, she won't look at me like I'm some sort of twisted footnote to her mother's story. David rested a hand on my shoulder. Whatever happens, you're not facing this alone. I looked at my kids, my imperfect, temperamental, fiercely loyal kids, and felt something warm steady inside me. They'd grown into good people despite my mistakes. Maybe because of them. Who knows? But mentions of my father's will always summon Martin Hayes like a moth to legal flame. He arrived within an hour, carrying a briefcase, wearing a suit far too formal for Dawn. Jack, he said, adjusting his glasses. You look terrible. I value your enthusiasm for honesty, I replied. He nodded at the envelope on the table. Is that what I think it is? Yes. And no, I didn't know it existed. And yes, Richard tried to steal it. And yes, you're allowed to feel smug for warning me that something smelled rotten weeks ago. Martin actually smiled. I wasn't going to say that. You were absolutely going to say that. He shrugged. Probably. We opened the will together. Or rather, Martin handled it with latex gloves as if it were a wild animal capable of biting. Father's handwriting flowed across every page, strong, elegant, the handwriting of a man who believed in the permanence of ink. It read like an apology wrapped in instructions. He left Margaret a large sum of money. He asked that Clara, if she ever came into the world, be cared for. And he acknowledged her as his firstborn. But the real explosion came at the end. If this testament had been delivered on time, the entirety of the Whitmore estate, every property, every company, every last dusty art collection, would have been divided equally between me and Margaret's child. Not Olivia. Not David. Not Richard. Clara. Martin exhaled slowly. This is monumental. Just what every 82-year-old man hopes to hear, I said dryly. Olivia leaned in. We have to tell her. Of course, David said. She deserves to know who she is. I nodded, though dread twisted deep in my gut. We tell her. Properly. Kindly. And we protect her from Richard. Martin snapped the will shut. Then we need to move quickly. Richard will file claims by morning. Let him, I said. For once, we have the truth on our side. I should have known better than to tempt fate. I expected Clara to call me immediately after the break-in. She didn't. Instead, I didn't hear from her at all. By afternoon I was pacing my study, pacing so hard that the old oak floor creaked questions beneath my feet. I must have checked my phone 50 times. Nothing. Each minute stretched like taffy. Finally, Olivia appeared in the doorway. Dad, maybe she just needs space. Yes, I said, turning for the 100th time. But space implies she knows something. She doesn't. She's just gone. I pressed a hand to my chest, surprised by a sharp ache there. Love at my age feels different. It's not bright or frantic. It's deep, anchoring, like discovering a melody you thought you'd forgotten. Losing it feels like drowning under memories you haven't lived yet. The phone rang then. I answered so quickly I nearly launched it across the room. Clara? No, a cold voice replied. But I appreciate your enthusiasm. Richard. Of course. Richard, I said, sitting heavily. How generous of you to call after breaking into my home. Let's not be dramatic, Uncle Jack. You entered through a window. That is the definition of dramatic. He scoffed. I'm calling because you forced my hand. I'm filing for an injunction against the estate. Consider this your courtesy notification. You're not getting a dime, I said. The truth is going to bury your claims. The truth, he repeated. You mean the charming tale about your father's secret daughter? Don't embarrass yourself. There's no proof. There is, I said calmly. And you know it. Silence crackled through the line. You're playing with fire, he said finally. I've lived long enough to enjoy the warmth, I replied. He hung up. I slowly set the phone down. Olivia let out a low whistle. That man is a walking lawsuit. David poked his head in. We found something. We followed him to the library, where the officers had missed a detail. Muddy footprints by the back door, one pair belonging to Richard and another, smaller pair. Smaller. Feminine. Clara's. A chill threaded down my spine. She was here? David nodded. One of the officers reviewed camera footage from the gate. She came last night. Around the time of the break-in. Olivia's brows lifted. Maybe she saw something. Or Richard dragged her into this, I whispered. The idea of Clara, gentle, sharp-witted Clara, being coerced, threatened, or used as leverage made something fierce ignite in me. Love at 82 apparently comes with the emotional stability of a raccoon guarding a shiny object. We find her, I said. Now. We drove. Through town, past the harbor, up toward Willow Lane where Clara lived in the small brick townhouse she'd inherited from her mother. She wasn't there. Her car was gone. Her neighbor, a kindly retired nurse named Mrs. Ellery, said she'd left early that morning with a suitcase. She looked upset, Mrs. Ellery said. Told me she needed to clear her head. That family troubles were resurfacing. The phrase hit like a punch. Clara had grown up never knowing who her father was. Margaret told her only that he was a man with a good heart who lost his courage. Now here I was, a new brand of disappointment waiting like a trap. We searched through evening and deep into night. We called hospitals, her friends, the art gallery where she worked. Nothing. By midnight, exhaustion weighed on my bones. Olivia persuaded me to rest. Dad, you're barely standing. I gave in, reluctantly, and lay down on the couch in my study. Sleep came in fractured pieces. Sometime around dawn, I woke to a soft knock. Clara stood in the doorway. Her eyes were rimmed red. Her hair tangled from wind. She looked like someone who'd walked miles through a storm and found herself at a stranger's door. Except she wasn't a stranger. And she wasn't the woman I'd been courting. She was my sister. Jack, she whispered. My breath caught. She stepped inside, closed the door behind her, stood very still. I heard about the break-in, she said quietly. Richard called me. He told me everything. Or at least, what he wanted me to hear. I sat up slowly. Clara. She held up a trembling hand. Let me speak first. Please. I nodded. I didn't want to believe him, she said. But I remembered the way you looked when you asked me about my mother. The way you hesitated. I knew something was wrong. She took another step toward me. It felt like watching someone approach a cliff. He said your father abandoned my mother. That she was the firstborn heir. That I'm a Whitmore. And that you knew about it and chose to lie to me. I never lied, I said softly. I didn't know until days ago. I swear it. Her face crumpled, but she didn't cry. Clara rarely cried. She endured quietly, like her mother. I don't know what to feel, she whispered. About you. About this. I trusted you, Jack. I let you in. And now I find out that you're my brother, I said. That word tasted like broken glass. Yes, she said, voice shaking. My brother. The room swelled with silence. I rose and approached her slowly, as if she were a wounded bird who might take flight. I didn't know, I repeated. But if I had known, I would have protected you. I would have told you the truth immediately. You have no idea how much I regret. She stepped forward and placed her hand on my cheek. Jack, she said, her voice barely audible. You can't apologize for something neither of us caused. I felt tears sting my eyes. But I can apologize for falling for you before I knew. A flicker of sorrow crossed her face. Then we're both guilty. We stood like that, two people who had loved each other wrongly, unknowingly, entirely, before she finally withdrew her hand. What do we do now? She whispered. We survive the truth, I said. Together. As siblings. As family. As people who loved the same woman, our mother, and the woman who raised you. Clara's breath hitched. Richard wants to destroy all of this. He won't, I said. Not while I'm breathing. She managed a frail smile. You're 82. That's not as threatening as you think. Then I'll take shallow breaths until this is settled. Her laugh came out watery and beautiful. She stepped into my arms then. I held her, not as a lover, but as a man who'd found a sister in the ruins of his father's sins. For the first time in years, the weight in my chest eased. When she finally pulled away, she said, I'm not running anymore. Whatever happens next, I'm part of it. Good, I said. Because the next part is going to get messy. And somewhere deep in the house, as if on cue, Olivia shouted, Dad, you need to see this. Clara and I exchanged a look, equal parts dread and resolve, and followed the sound of my daughter's voice toward the living room. Something waited for us there. Something that would change the final chapter of our family's story. And I had the distinct, sinking suspicion that Richard wasn't finished yet. I used to believe that the world ends with a bang, or with a final breath, or with the sound of a gavel slamming down to confirm you've made a catastrophic mistake. Turns out it ends, or rather, restarts, with the creak of a wooden chair and the awkward coughing of a lawyer who very much wishes he'd chosen dentistry instead. Are we all here? Asked Matthew Clark, my attorney, sounding like a kindergarten teacher attempting to herd crocodiles. We were in the same room where I had signed my disastrous last will. Walnut paneling, tall windows leaking pale morning light, portraits of my long-dead relatives staring down with expressions that suggested they expected incompetence from me and were, as usual, not disappointed. My daughter, Rebecca, was seated stiffly to my left, arms folded like she was trying to keep herself from physically attacking someone. My son, Daniel, sat across from her, still wearing the same tight-lipped neutrality he had perfected through years of corporate diplomacy. And then there was her, Claire Moore, the woman whose name had detonated my family and resurrected the version of me I thought I'd buried. She stood near the window, sunlight outlining her like a chalk figure. Calm. Composed. The eye of the storm she had unknowingly walked into. I cleared my throat. So, Matthew, let's get this over with before Rebecca's head explodes. My daughter shot me a look that could blister paint. That's a real possibility, she said. Given the past week. The past week. A swirl of arguments, reconciliations, long conversations with Claire, even longer ones with myself. Nights spent awake, replaying decades of silence and shame. Days spent pacing my estate like a ghost unsure which room belonged to him. Matthew straightened a stack of papers that didn't need straightening. As you all know, your father has decided to amend his will. Thank God, murmured Daniel, rubbing his temple. Rebecca didn't thank anyone. Not even metaphorically. Matthew continued. This meeting is simply to confirm the changes, establish clarity, and ensure no further misunderstandings. Everyone looked at Claire. She managed not to flinch. That woman had a spine made of tempered steel. I inhaled slowly and pushed myself to my feet. Before we get into the legalities, I said, I want to say something. Rebecca groaned. Daniel adjusted his posture like he was bracing for turbulence. But Claire, she met my gaze and something inside me settled. Like a compass turning toward its true north for the first time in years. I know I created this mess, I began. I wrote a will that made you think I was choosing someone else over my own family. And you had every right to be angry. But that will wasn't about money. It wasn't even about Claire. Rebecca rolled her eyes so hard I heard the air shift. It was about guilt, I said. About a debt I thought I owed to a woman I wronged decades ago. And when her daughter, Claire, reached out to me, I reacted like a fool who thought he could rewrite the past with a pen stroke. I paused, letting the truth settle over us like dust. But the past isn't the dangerous thing. It's the silence around it. Claire looked down at her hands, then back up at me. She already knew what I was going to say. We'd talked through most of it, yet she listened like every word mattered. When I was young, I said, I loved a woman named Eleanor Moore, and I let her down in ways I've spent a lifetime regretting. When she died, I convinced myself that regret was the same thing as responsibility. And so when Claire appeared, I tried to repay a debt that wasn't mine to repay. Rebecca let out a sharp breath. So you're saying this whole disaster was some emotional charity project? No, I replied. I'm saying it was cowardice disguised as generosity. Eleanor didn't ask for anything, and Claire didn't either. I built that story myself because it was easier than facing the truth. And what truth is that? Asked Daniel quietly. That family isn't something you pay back, I said. It's something you show up for, even when it's painful. Especially when it's painful. The room went very still. I turned toward Claire. And you, I said. You didn't come here for money. You came for answers. 4 pieces of your mother's life you never understood. You deserved honesty, not a hurricane. She gave me a faint, warm smile. The kind that landed softly, like a hand resting on your shoulder. So, I said, exhaling, I've rewritten the will. Again. Properly this time. Rebecca sat up. And, she demanded. And everything, the estate, the assets, the company shares, is being divided equally between the 2 of you. I looked at my children. That's how it should have been all along. Rebecca blinked. Once, twice. Then burst out, Are you serious? After everything? Yes, I said. I'm serious. And Claire? Daniel asked, glancing her way. I smiled at Claire, a little helplessly. Claire gets nothing. Rebecca's jaw dropped. That's the part you're happy about, I added dryly. Try not to look so disappointed. Claire laughed, a small, breathy sound that loosened something in my chest. But, I continued, she stays in my life. Because I want her there. Not out of guilt. Not out of obligation. Because she's become important to me. Rebecca bristled. So what, now you 2 are? No, I cut in. She's not a replacement for your mother. Not a second chance at something romantic. She's a connection to a part of my life I tried too long to bury. And she's my friend. Believe it or not, old men can have those. Claire stepped forward slightly. If it helps, she said softly, I never planned to intrude. I just wanted the truth about my mother. And I got more than I expected. Your father didn't owe me anything. Rebecca eyed her warily. What exactly did you expect? Closure, Claire replied. But sometimes closure looks like unexpected beginnings. That sounded almost poetic. If I'd said it, Rebecca would have mocked me for hours. Silence hung in the room for a long, strained moment. Then Daniel spoke, voice measured. Dad, I'm glad you fixed the will. I really am. But this doesn't magically fix everything else. I know, I said. I'm not expecting a parade. I'm just expecting honesty. And maybe a little patience. Rebecca crossed her arms. You think patience is going to make up for the fact that you tried to give everything to a stranger? I stepped closer to her, slowly. She isn't a stranger, I said. Not anymore. And neither are you, not to me. Not if we stop acting like we're on opposite sides of a courtroom. Rebecca swallowed, her expression flickering between anger and something more fragile. I'm tired, she whispered. I know, I said. Me too. Then, astonishingly, she reached for my hand. An awkward, halting movement. But she did it, and I took it. Daniel stood as well and placed a hand on my shoulder. I felt like a man cracking out of ice. Matthew cleared his throat again. So, should I continue? Yes, I said. Finish the paperwork before one of them changes their mind. The legalities took another hour. Signatures, countersignatures, dates, stamps, a few moments when Rebecca nearly threw a paperweight at Matthew for existing. But when it was done, a strange lightness filled the space. Not joy. Not yet. But air. Finally, air. After the others left, Rebecca stiff but not hostile, Daniel quietly thoughtful, Claire lingered near the window again. Morning had grown brighter, washing the room in soft gold. You did well, she said. I almost fainted, I admitted. Don't let the stoic facade fool you. She smiled. You didn't owe me a place in your will. Or a place in your family. But thank you for the truth. And for the kindness. I wasn't kind, I said. I was late. There's a difference. I'll take late, she replied. Late is still something. We stood together in the warm quiet of the room. The portraits of my ancestors finally looked less judgmental. Or maybe I simply stopped caring. Claire, I said, you know you're welcome here. Not just today. Not just because of all this. Anytime. She nodded. And you're welcome in my life, she answered. In whatever way feels right. I chuckled. You know how old men flirt? We say things like in whatever way feels right. We think it makes us mysterious. You? She laughed lightly. Mysterious? No. But sincere, yes. It was strange. With her, everything felt unburdened. Not like love. Not like romance. Something softer. Something steadier. Something I could handle without breaking anything else. I should go, she said. You have a lot to rebuild with them. I will, I said. One conversation at a time. Before she left, she placed her hand on my arm. Your mother, she said quietly, would be proud. I swallowed hard. I hope so, I whispered back. She walked out, and I watched her go, not as a ghost from my past, not as a wound, not as a warning, but as a human being who had stepped into my life just in time to help me untangle it. The house was silent after she left. Sunlight glinted off the papers on the table, my final, corrected will. Not a curse. Not a confession. Just a document that no longer lied. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like a man who could walk forward rather than backward. Later that afternoon, Rebecca texted me a single message. Dinner tomorrow? Just us? No surprises. Daniel texted 5 minutes after. I'll join too. And I'll bring the good wine. I stared at those messages for a long moment. Then I laughed. Not because everything was perfect, but because things were finally real. And real, I discovered, was more valuable than all the millions I'd ever made. I put my phone down, stepped out onto the balcony, and let the breeze carry away the last fragments of guilt, regret, and solitude I'd held onto for decades. A new story had begun, one without secrets, without false debts, without ghosts. Just a stubborn old man, a complicated family, and a life still worth living. And that, I thought, was enough. More than enough.